Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for coming on and checking out this grant writing webinar. I want to thank MusicTT really quickly for inviting me to do this webinar and partnering with Pangea. Again, my name is Malika Green. You can probably tell from my accent that I am from the United States, but my mother's a Trini, so I'm not completely new to Trinidad. I'm also a panist, and I moved to Trinidad in early 2019. So I've been living here for almost 2 years now. I went to Northern Illinois University, so I have 2 degrees in Steelpan. I'm a performer, composer, arranger, educator. Went right into education after I finished at NIU in 2007. So I've been doing that for several years, and I had been working with several nonprofits in Maryland and Chicago and in Pennsylvania, where I went to school as well. And I actually wrote a proposal that allowed me to study Steelpan education in different parts of the world, which eventually initiated this move to Trinidad and Tobago. And I'm doing some different things now, but I just want to give you a quick little background about me and I guess why MusicTT would consider inviting me to lead this webinar. So just a little bit of overview about this webinar. This is a really basic introduction to grant writing, and I will interject a bit throughout about my personal experience. As I said, I worked a lot with nonprofits, and I worked specifically with Steelpan education in the U.S. So I do have experience with creating programs, creating new Steelpan programs in schools and outside of schools, and working on artistic projects as well. So if there's any questions throughout this webinar, please feel free to throw it in the chat. I don't mind, especially since this is a small group. At least for right now, I can divert a little bit from my presentation to answer your questions. I don't mind that at all. Also, a lot of my experience, the majority of my experience is in education. So a lot of my examples that I may give will be based on school programs or working with youth. So again, as this is a small group, I think it's great because people can put in, Is anyone else having trouble with audio? One person's having some trouble with audio, but yeah, a lot of my examples will come from working with kids, working with schools, working with nonprofit organizations as partners. And so, yeah, I think that's it. Getting difficulty with audio. Let's see. Okay, MusicTT is fine. Is there anybody else that's okay with the audio, or it's some audio fluctuation? Any suggestions from MusicTT on fixing that? I am not very tech savvy when it comes to this. I just hope that things plug in and work. So I don't know if there's anything I can do on my end. Is this better? All right. Okay, well, I'll try to hold the mic like this. We'll go ahead and get started. And If it's horrible, okay. Okay, great. All right, so it's me then. My process for speaking in the mic. So I will go like this, and we'll go ahead and get started. Oops. I went through this earlier, so sorry. All right, here we are. It is not that scary, I promise. And as I said, this is an introduction. So hopefully by the end, you'll feel like if you haven't written a grant before or you're thinking about doing it, that this can help you get started as far as structuring how you're going to approach the grant writing process and tackle a project. Okay, so we're going to cover your purpose, the details, which I've just broken down into a who, what, where, why, when, how, some tips, and then some questions at the end. So it should be pretty straightforward. Again, please stop me at any time in the chat with a question or a comment. All right. So your purpose, having a clear purpose for your project, of course, is going to help with research for grants. Whatever your goal is, your funding should help you with reaching your goal in an effective way. And don't let a grant opportunity take you away from your goal. Now, the reason I have that last sentence in there, don't let this grant opportunity take away from your goal, is because it's easy to find the grants. There's thousands of grants out there, but does it fit your event that you want to have, or your program, your organization? And there could be, small variations in the grant, in the proposal that you have to write, that could cause you to kind of go away from your main purpose for doing whatever you're doing. So if your project is to have a series of concerts for primary school children in a specific area of Trinidad, and then you find a grant that says, well, this is really specifically for adults in in elder homes, and it's for a specific time of the year or something, and it's completely off of what you're focused on. You have to consider all of that. Even though it may be something to help get started, you may say, okay, well, maybe I'll do some concert series in a hospice or a home, and then move on to children. You have to think about where you're starting and where you want to end up, right? I mean, if your goal is really to work with a specific age group or a specific demographic, really stick to your guns. If you see yourself starting with a concert series for children, and in 5 years you want to have a full-fledged Steelpan music school, stay on that path, and you will eventually find the grant that fits your project, that works for you. And remember, there's always other ways to fundraise, although we're not going to discuss those today. But, of course, you can always hit the pavement, work with for-profit organizations and see if they will donate to your cause. But don't let those things get you sidetracked. And then, of course, know your purpose when you're researching, because that will help you not to stumble upon those grants that are going to make you go sidetracked sidetrack you into something else, right? So if you know you specifically want to work with high school kids, with secondary school kids, and you specifically want to do music production classes with those students, you know, you can look for grants around professional development, which that idea could potentially fit into. You can work in, arts grants, obviously, music education, and so on. But you won't end up stumbling on, things that have to do with preschool kids or, professional development for music educators or anything like that. And the last reason I wanted to bring that up is because with the world constantly changing and priorities of granting foundations, things change, right? We're in this global pandemic. One of the organizations that I work with in the States, they've served a community through the Steelpan. They work with a lot of kids teaching music education via the Steelpan. And a lot of the families were hit really, really hard by the pandemic. So this organization is still finding a way to teach music, but they're also providing free music. Hello, apologies for that. I'm so sorry. I really have issues with the internet, but back on now. Okay, so that's your purpose. Next, details. So this is the exciting part, putting meat on those bones. You're looking for a grant probably because you already have an idea, and that's exciting. You want to figure out a way to implement this project or this program, or create this event. So, so we get started with who. So this is just going to be a who, what, where, why, when, how section. Who. So a word that is used pretty often in the granting industry is stakeholders. Who are your stakeholders? Now that just means anyone who is interested in seeing your project come to fruition, right? It could be the people in a specific community. It could be people who are indirectly impacted, say people at relevant organizations or organizations that are similar to yours, other musicians. It could be educators, of course. Basically, anyone who is directly or indirectly impacted by your project, your event, your program. So those are some things that you could just list out. A lot of foundations, even smaller agencies ask for that now. They often use that word stakeholders, and then they'll categorize it. And then they'll also want you to categorize it, how these stakeholders are impacted directly. Are they industry? Are they people in the audience who are going to be receiving these services or attending this event, and so on? So that's pretty straightforward. Who is going to be impacted? And then, of course, more specifically, if I mentioned working with kids, if you're working with a specific age group of kids, also be specific about the actual age. Don't just say primary school kids. If it's standards 1 through 3, or if it's secondary school, if it's form 4 and 5, or 3 and 4, and so on. And even as you get into tertiary level or beyond, you could still be as specific as well as far as putting an actual age 21 through 40. And yeah, I'm trying to think of other examples, but if you have questions, of course, you can go ahead. Your staff, of course, is extremely important for a couple of reasons. I know oftentimes in the Steelpan world, we create programs when we're creating, let's say, a school program for kids or something, or a training program. It's focused on, it's centered around the person who's going to be leading it, right? So if Devon Stewart is going to be leading a improvisation series, it's 5 classes. Everything is going to be centered around how Devon Stewart works, how he teaches, his process for getting this information across. But other things you always want to consider that I feel like we don't consider enough in the Steelpan community is like succession plans, or if that person is not available, who's next to carry it on. If this is something that you see long term, like you want to have it's a concert series with a pre-concert lecture, and the pre-concert lecture is done by a certain person, by Josanne Francis or Mia Gormady, right? And after 2 years, that person is no longer available. Do you have other people on staff already who are already assisting with this program, who you can train to bring up to speed to do this project, to carry it forward? And I honestly have been on both ends of that. I've been in a situation where someone wrote a grant where I was like the central figure in the grant as the educator. And then I moved, I moved to Chicago, and then they had to kind of figure out what to do, who they were going to bring in. Luckily, they were able to figure something out, and then I've been on the other end where I was working in a program, and we had things based around a specific person doing specific work, and then they moved to Puerto Rico. So, and in that case, we kind of struggled in finding another person to do this particular class. It was a boomba class, and that's a very specific type of music that is grounded in a very specific culture, and finding someone to replace that was quite difficult. That program ended up taking a hiatus for a whole semester while they had to figure it out. So so I think that's something to always consider. You definitely want to have very strong staff. Of course, that's kind of a given. But I would say always start with at least 3 people that you have in mind, and have a lead person, and have a person who assists, who can run in case the lead person is not there. And then partners. There's definitely a growing interest in collaborative projects now. Organizations, granting organizations are not so much interested in just funding you and your one thing or your organization and what you're going to do. They want to see that you are deeply rooted in a community, and that you have great connections with other organizations that can help you help your project succeed. And there's different ways to approach that, because you can have partners who are in kind, partners who lend you a space, partners who lend you resources. They lend you chairs for your event or tables. They may be a partner in that they reach out to their own audience and advertise your project so that you can build up your audience, right? So there's different ways to go about that. But again, listing things is always a great way to start, right? List out anyone who you think could somehow assist you in this project. Especially if it's someone who can offer something in kind that would, help you with your budget. You won't have to pay for chairs, or you won't have to pay for time at a certain space to rent a space or something. So that is your who. Okay, the what. And this is definitely the fun part. As I mentioned before, if you're looking for grants, you probably have an idea already, and it's probably something that you're excited about, and you want to make this thing happen. So you want to start, not start the grant with a proposal, but start with a good story. When you're working on this with a team of people, and it should be a team of people. I mean, even if you start out writing out these ideas yourself, you want to bring in some other people to help you flesh out your ideas, your details. So, what is the impetus behind this? What is the idea? You're working in a REMA, and you decide that you want to start a music composition program for secondary school kids, and it's going to be technology driven. They're going to learn how to produce, and after 8 weeks, these students are going to have a concert that they're going to put on. They're going to have music that they've written, and so how can you make that a story? Can you talk about the area where the kids are? Is there already a lot of music? Is there already a lot of great arts going on, and you want to expand on that? Is there a specific maybe group of students, or maybe an organization that you're going to partner with that's already doing some really, really great work, and maybe those students are learning to play instruments, and you're bringing in technology in some way. So what's going to get the grant writer excited? Basically, it's like, wow, these kids are going to learn. They're going to learn their instruments, and then they're going to learn how to produce actual tracks, and then have a big concert at the end. That's exciting. How, and then well, eventually we'll talk about how we're going to do that. But so get your ideas together about what you want this to look like, and this will be your narrative section. Basically, well, what is this project? Is it a professional development project? Is it a music making project? Is it a performance project where students are just performing, and you're creating a space for kids to perform? So, and I always go to kids because that's mainly been my experience. So I hope these ideas are translating. Data and statistics. Granting organizations love data. They love statistics. It's not enough to just say it's a good idea, I want to do it, and I know that people are going to love it. Why are you going to start a program in ARIMA for secondary school students? How many of the students do you really think would be interested, and why? How many other organizations are you competing with for this project, right? Is there someone doing something similar, or is there no one doing anything, right? Do you have a huge audience of students that that just don't have access, and you feel that this can fill a need? And then what are the statistics? You want to make sure that the grantor knows that you have an idea of the demographics of your area, right? So you want to work with secondary school kids, but you're working, you want to do it in an area that only has maybe one secondary school in, a 10-kilometer radius or something. I don't know, there's a lot of places like that in Trinidad, but you have to think about that, right? How many people are going to have access to this? And then just in general, having data on your audience, right? It's helpful to you. If you're going to start something, let's say it's a paid event, and maybe you're having it in an area where the price point that you want for it is actually not in line with the income of that area, right? Or it's a paid program or professional development, So all those things you need to consider, you need to research, and that will certainly help you as you flesh out your what is this going to be? It's paid, free, and so on. Outcomes, absolutely important. What do you seek to achieve? If you're going to have this program, this music composition program, what's going to be the outcome? Are all the students going to write a song, or is it going to be 5 groups of students are going to write 2 songs? Is everyone going to learn how to use the music technology that you're introducing to them? And how well are they going to use it? Are they going to be able to, take an additional course after this first section is finished? So think about what, in the end, when people say, yeah, this program finished, what are they going to say was the result? There was a concert where all the kids performed, and all of the students, or maybe 75% of the students, are going to go on and take the next more advanced course. 50% of the students now want to take private lessons, who they weren't taking private lessons before on their instrument, that kind of thing. So consider all of those options. Good morning, Mahalia. Consider all of those outcomes, sorry. And then know keywords and phrases. That's just more research, as early as I mentioned, like stakeholders. So if you're in arts education, and you're working with, let's say, underserved or under-resourced communities, know what the keywords are so that the grantor can know what it is you're referring to. Arts, it used to be arts in education. Now it's arts education. I used to work with a program that was about arts integration. And that's just a phrase that it was professional development arts integration program. And the grantors in the Chicago area knew exactly what that meant. And we use that phrase. So, that's just a language thing, and understanding also what that means to the specific funder that you're working with, because those terms could mean slightly different things. If you're doing an out-of-school program or an in-school program, field trips versus one-off excursions, what's a education concert versus a live concert. So an education concert is, another term that is used in, I guess, arts education in the States, but and it was kind of slow to grow, but it's something that if you were not in the arts education world, you wouldn't really know what an education concert was. We would often have to explain that to people outside of the industry, but people like in the industry knew what it was. So yeah, so that is the what. So I hope that all makes sense. And once I reach the end of any slide, if you have any questions, please feel free to drop it in the chat. Okay. When? So again, being specific, and don't take anything for granted. Create timetables and consider this closely when budgeting. I'm actually going to go out of order here because I would say start out with creating draft timetables. Right now, the when it's two things depending on what your project is. The when can be when do activities for this specific project start, right? So if you have this music composition course that you're doing in Arima that for some reason I just made up, so we're going with that. And the program is going to start in September when school starts, but you need to have a registration period. You need to have an advertising period, right? A recruitment period. Registration. You have your week of orientation, right? And then you have your culminating program at the end. And then there's other small events that you'll have in between the program starting and the program actually finishing. So that's a timetable, but then also thinking about the specific program, the running of the program itself, right? So if this program is 8 weeks, how many meetings are you going to have with your class every week? And how many specific minutes, the actual minutes that you're going to be doing this activity, right? So if it's 3 hours every week, you can't really say that it's 3 hours of actual instruction, right? Because there'll be maybe a half hour of break, or maybe it's a Saturday thing and it's 5 hours and you have to have 45 minutes for lunch. You have to account for all of that, right? So something that's a 5 hour session may actually be 4 hours of instruction, and you want to be able to say at the end, it's an 8-week program, 4 hours of instruction every week over those 8 weeks. That students will receive 32 hours, or maybe you want to say, they'll receive 30 hours, because every week you're going to have an hour, and then you're going to have for lunch, and you're going to have 15 minutes for break. That is actually really important. I know it sounds really tedious, but it's really important for a couple of reasons. I say consider this closely when budgeting, because you do want to consider exactly how much money you need to pay people. But also, to prepare for a 5-hour class, is someone going to need to have prep time? Are you going to pay them an extra hour each week to prepare for this 4-hour class? Which I worked on a program which we did something like that, and it did help because it was kind of at a funny time where the person had like an hour of downtime of following another class that they had before, and so like paying them a little bit extra actually helped to help them suffer through an hour of what they saw as wasted time. But also on the foundation end, whoever you're getting this grant from, they'll want to see, 30 hours of training on any specific thing. Well, that's a decent amount of time to become acquainted with a new technique. I worked on a project in Chicago where we had a professional development program for elementary school teachers, and it was 20 hours over a full school year. And that 20 hours was extremely important because teachers in the city of Chicago actually need 20 hours of professional development every year. That's just like one of their requirements every year as a teacher, to get 20 hours of professional development and something, right, related to their what they're teaching. So what was great about this program I was working with was that they could get all of their professional development hours through this one program, instead of looking for 5 hours with this organization and 5 hours with this training, and then another 4 hours here, and getting it piecemeal. So and all of these things just make your application stronger as you move forward, and create a really strong, solid program where you know how every minute is spent, how every time, all the time for your instructors and your audience, your participants is spent. Don't take anything for granted with the time. If you say it's 2 hours, and just say, assume that there's 15 minutes for a break. Well, no, actually put that down and be really specific about it. So that is when. Where, kind of use the same language from when, be specific. Don't take anything for granted. Use a map if necessary. I mean, obviously the map is for if you're creating a program where people need to come from different places to get to the activity or get to the event. Just thinking about whether it's really accessible or not. And also considering the time of day, right? That's going back to the when. But if you're doing, some sort of improvisation class for, let's just say it's for adults, right? Thinking about people's work schedules, and if you're going to have it out in Barataria, and maybe a lot of your people are coming from Port of Spain after work, and thinking about all those little things. So being really, really specific. I mean, it sounds like a very tedious little thing, but I've been in situations where you have to really restructure a timetable because of where you're thinking about having this program. I mentioned I work with schools and doing after school programs, where is always a big discussion. Okay, kids in this area get out of school at 4:00. Well, how long is it going to take them to get, to this neighborhood in the city? 45 minutes is that really feasible? So that's why I say use a map if necessary. I don't know if that's really necessary in Trinidad because there's few standard ways to get around. But if possible, hey, pull it out. Consider your priorities. Just consider. But that's going back to purpose, really. Consider what this is, right? So if it's a professional development and that you need, you want adults to be in this, people who have jobs, consider where this space is in relation to where a lot of people are, where a lot of your audience is coming from. And you need to make it accessible for that group of people, okay? So a lot of youth programs happen on the weekends, right? Your priority is working with kids, make it accessible for parents, make it easy for parents to get their kids to and from your program, your school. And of course, do your research. Always do your research. I will throw that in every once in a while just as a reminder. And I will say it again at the end, right? The other obvious things like safety, parking, what the pandemic has done to us now, that it's put a lot of things online. So maybe where is going to be less important, but also just what kind of technology. If you're having it online, there are more programs now that are catering for music classes. So do your research, find out what's available out there, what has the best sound, what has the best apps that you can attach to what you're doing, right? And then if you need additional funds for that, make sure that goes into the budget as well. All right. Why? Why are you doing this? Again, do your research. Clarity and data, statistics, something we talked about before, but definitely knowing the need or knowing the problem, right? So maybe there's some really strong Steelpan programs, right, at the secondary level, but you don't think that there's enough, you don't think that there's enough improvisation happening, or you don't think that there's enough happening outside of school panoramas, right? Be really clear about how this project is going to address what you see as the need, right? Maybe there's not enough collaboration happening between Steelpan and non-percussion instruments, right? Maybe you want to create programs that creates smaller ensembles where people can have a concert series throughout the year. Just random ideas I'm throwing out, but anything is possible, right? So why is it something that's needed? Like, is there really an audience for that? And that will really help you to fine tune what it is that you're doing. Maybe as you're doing your research, you realize, well, yeah, I really want to do improvisation for secondary school students, but maybe I can do improvisation in the primary school. Maybe that's where it needs to start. And why is that? We say, well, the earlier you start, the more advanced you become, the more likely students will be to continue it or, get to an advanced level when they get to secondary school. And that can also become easier if you're already working with an audience. If you're working with a school that already has a program and someone says, look, we have students who have an interest in this, and we surveyed them, and we need to fill this need. So that comes in with your data as well. Do you have the capacity to survey your audience, right? If you can, I would say definitely do that, right? See in writing what it is that people really want, and then you'll learn a lot as well. You'll definitely learn a lot. I've done that in programs where what you thought you wanted to do actually isn't what people want, right? Or the time of the year that you wanted to do it is not going to work for people. Or you want to start, I've had programs in Chicago especially that we want to start in September. We're going to start it hard in September. We're going to do it intensely. And then you realize that's really not the culture. People will take the month of September to register for things. And then they'll start it intensely in October. And then it's done by April. Maybe you want to finish by June, So... And you may tweak few things, if your program is going to be 100 hours of instruction or development or whatever, how can you still fit that into a different time frame depending on what your audience is telling you, depending on what you say, depending on what they say they want, So consider all that. And I keep saying don't take anything for granted because, we may say Steelpan is so fun. Everyone's going to want to learn it. But have you really considered everything, the when, the why, the how you're doing it, of course, but also why? Like, why should people go to a Steelpan concert or go to a lecture about Steelpan or take a Steelpan class, and it can't just be, it's because it's fun and because it's Trinidad culture. We wish it was that easy, but I think in Steelpan world, we don't talk enough about Pan's place in music education and in music industry. I mean, we know from experience that students who play Steelpan can feel that instant gratification, right? They've made a sound, and maybe after about an hour, they could play a simple tune, You can't say that for any horn instrument. Certainly can't say that for string instruments, right? And even with a lot of percussion instruments, even though the principle is the same, you hit it, you scratch it, you beat it, tap it, whatever. With a lot of conventional percussion instruments, you still have different techniques that you might have to learn to play different instruments in the percussion family. So, for example, you can't use the same technique that you use to play maracas that you use for a marimba, but those are still in the percussion family. The thing that's so exciting about the Steelpan, and I think this is what has allowed the programs I work with to be successful in the past, is that we've talked about how it's one technique to play all of the instruments in the ensemble, and also students can learn about the hierarchy of an ensemble, of an orchestra. We do call them steel bands, but you have the person who plays the melody, you have the person who plays the harmony, you have the person who plays the background parts, and they can move around. And those students can become musicians. If they're taught well, they can become musicians quicker than students who are playing other instruments, right? Who have to spend a year learning to breathe. Or I'm exaggerating, but maybe, a couple of months learning to breathe just so they can make a sound on the trumpet. Several months learning how to hold the violin and the bow properly so that they can make a sound. So now that, of course, is the approach for education. But if you're doing a concert, why do people want to come? Why should people come to a lecture concert? Why should people learn how to improvise? So that's some research there. Be clear, have your data. Last thing, why should the granting agency fund this? So that's also doing research about the agency, right? Look at their past grantees. See what projects that they're interested in. If they're an organization that is really interested in Caribbean cultures specifically and passing it down to the next generation, how can you write your grant to that, right? As long as it's still within your purpose, of course, not changing anything, but how do you make them see the connection? Don't assume that they're going to see it, right? You have to make sure it's there in their face so that they see, obviously we want to fund this project because this is in line with what we see as a granting organization. So next, how are you going to do it? That's sometimes the hardest part, right? How will you actually meet all of your outcomes and your deliverables? So have a very clear plan from preparation to implementation to evaluation. All those things have to connect, right? So earlier I mentioned when, in the when section where you're talking about your timetables, when do activities for the program actually start? So if you have to start, you're doing a concert series that's running from October through May. It's once a month. You need to hire a program manager, maybe from July at the latest, right? Or earlier. Let's say May. You have to hire them from the May before the October where you want to start. And you're hiring. Your interviewing process and your hiring, your advertising, your surveying of the community, your collaborating with your partners to to grow your audience for this concert series, right? Are you going to be working with radio stations to do ads? All of that is preparation, things you need to line up beforehand. And then going into the implementation part, what is it going to look like? What is it going to look like day to day, right? Or event to event. So again, I have to rely on my education experience, but with the implementation, what does it actually look like? Why is your program, your education program, so exciting, right? These students are going to be learning about music production, let's say, and what are they going to be doing each class? Is each class going to feature a impromptu, or not an impromptu, but maybe a performance at the end of the session? Is it going to be very hands-on? Is it going to be lecture-based? Our students going to be interacting with masters via an online, via an online system. And what's happening in between? Do people have projects? Do people have, videos or testimonials that they need to do in between events? And going into the evaluation part, right? You have to think about how you're going to actually report or show that this program was a success, right? So this, of course, relates to your outcomes. If you say you have specific outcomes, what are you using to evaluate that you actually met those outcomes, right? Obviously, if you have an outcome that says, I'm going to reach a certain amount of people, I'm going to have a concert that has 100 attendees. Well, that's easy, right? You can just count people when they show up, right? But maybe one of your outcomes is also that you're going to reach 50 secondary school students, and they're going to show up to the concert as well, show up to this concert series that you're creating. Well, how are you going to actually capture that information, right? You can't just do that by looking at people. You may have to have something that they need to fill out. Has this concert series increased people's interest in Steelpan, or increased people's interest in Steelpan jazz, right? Caribbean jazz. And that can't just be done, again, by, looking at people. You have to have some sort of way. Is it paper? Is it going to be, are you going to collect people's emails and then send them a quick survey to do after the event? Obviously, if you have a program that's running, that you're meeting with the same people all the time, you can have ways to assess how they're progressing, right? You can have formative assessments which happen during, and then you can have summative assessments which happen at the end, right? So obviously when I was working with kids, I did both, right? You have quizzes, you have in-class assessments, you have auditions to get into a program, then you have summative assessments, which may be a closing audition to see if students are going to move up to the next advanced class, or you have a culminating music theory test, in which case you could say, 90% of students received a mark of 80% or higher on this specific exam, and so on, right? But all of it connects from the very beginning into the evaluation, right? So from the preparation stage, if you know that in the end you want students to get an 80% or higher on this music theory exam, you need to have all the systems in place to make sure that they are progressing in the way that you need them to. And maybe part of the courses that they have to know how to use some online apps, right? So that could be part of preparation and implementation. Maybe you have staff who is training to train the students. And then of course, preparation would be, getting the software and making it available. Maybe you need to buy some sort of, not an iPad, but, one of those, oh God, I feel so old right now, but, a tablet or something for all of your participants, to make sure that they can access this information, right? So, no, I mean, this may be really blunt, but make sure you're not setting yourself up to fail. Have realistic goals at the end that are connected to you've prepared to reach them, and your implementation is just going to carry you forward to those outcomes, right? So yeah, I basically just talked through everything, but preparation, what needs to be done in the days, weeks, and months ahead of a project: surveys, marketing, and advertising, registration, training, interviews, hiring. Implementation, what does a project look like when it's live? And evaluation, how do you know it was successful? Do you have measurable outcomes? Yes, measurable. You do want to be able to track it. You can't just say everyone looked like they were having a good time. You actually have to measure how many people said that they had a good time at the event, right? And most things, you can find a way to measure, to put a number to it. And I mean, I will be honest and say this, for me, has been the most difficult part, because I've been on all aspects of projects, right? I've been on the actual, implementation, where you're instructing, you're doing the direct service, the activity, right? And then, of course, been a part of the grant writing part, but then also the evaluation part is really difficult, because you're in the midst of doing it all, and then you have to figure out, man, I know the kids had a good time, but how do I actually translate that on a survey? What are the actual questions? And you may need to bring in someone else, an outside person, to create an evaluation, a survey, an assessment for you, especially if it's a summative one that you're doing at the end, where you want people to evaluate the whole experience. If it was like a 6-month experience, you should have someone, hopefully a professional, who does statistics and evaluations to help you craft something. And this part is really important. I was in a situation with an organization I worked with in Chicago, where we had a phenomenal training program for teachers, and the evaluation just wasn't very good. And one of our funders almost said that they were going to pull out from funding us if we didn't come up with a better, a more adequate survey. And so we had to spend about $10,000 US, quite a bit. And I will say, from experience I had later after this project, it doesn't cost that much. But the point is that we had to spend money. We had to go outside and say, what are we missing here? Not so much what are we missing, but how do we craft something? Because this is not what we usually do. We do the thing, right? We teach the class, or we perform. We're not good so much at sitting down and saying, pulling out the right information from people to find out if this was successful or not. And of course, if you have to pay for it, you got to put that in the budget. or if it's going to take extra time, you need someone to go through all those surveys. Yeah, put that in the budget. Tips. Yeah, these are all pretty straightforward, but the first one, carefully read through the guidelines. I guess that just goes back to not taking things for granted too. I mean, when I say carefully read through the guidelines, like don't do it with a carib or, while you're sitting at the beach or whatever. It's like really sit down, have your notebook out, and look at the eligibility, and the guidelines. Make sure that you are eligible for this grant, because I haven't had this experience, but I've seen people work hard on a grant and then realize 2 days before that there's something that they missed and they're actually not eligible and they can't apply. Or they went ahead and applied and then we're told, well, yeah, you're actually missing this piece. You need to have a partner to apply for this grant, or 50% of your staff needs to be female if you're gonna apply for this grant, right? Or your grant project needs to be located in a specific area, or it needs to serve a specific age group of students, or a specific percentage of your audience needs to be X, Y, Z, whatever. So, and it could be a list of things. It could be a list of 10 things, and you are good with 9, but there's that one thing that causes you to not be eligible, and you have to be really careful that you're not wasting your time, especially. So with that, of course, attend webinars, ask questions, even just research who the staff are at the foundation or organization or a government agency. I didn't mention government agencies, but see who the people are that work there. See who you can talk to personally. To me, that's always been the best, is when you can get an actual person and ask them very specific questions about your project. And then even if you're not successful with the grant, usually you can go back to that specific person and say, what was it that caused this grant to not be successful? What was I missing? And usually people will be very helpful, right? Because essentially these agencies want to see projects come to fruition. And, if you have an idea that's exciting and really strong, and you spend time on this, you turned it in on time and everything, they will be willing to help you figure out what it is that you can improve upon, so that next time you can be successful. If you're writing a grant for another organization, they can help you and work out the details. Have several editors if possible. And these can even be editors who are not in the arts, they're not pianists. Get outside opinions. Talk to your boyfriend or girlfriend or parents. Because sometimes the best advice can come from those people who are not related, because they know nothing about it, and they may read over something and they'll say, this doesn't make any sense, or these numbers don't add up. Definitely have an accountant or a numbers person create the budget and run through the budget, right? And with that, also make sure that you have everything in there. You've considered anything that could cost any money, and that is reflected in the budget. Also, we talked about this in the last slide, but also consider the reporting requirements. We talked about it a little bit, the evaluations and so on, and how you're going to report. So You have how you're going to evaluate your program, but you also have monthly reports or quarterly reports or regular reports that you would have to do for a for your project, right? And depending on who the agency is that is giving you the grant, those reports can be really time consuming. You may need to have an assistant do those for you, or you may need to have tasks set out for specific people that can help you gather all the information you need for your reports, right? So your reports may include things about how many people attended your events in that month, what percentage of the people were from a specific area. Let's say if you're providing meals for students, how many students took a meal, how many meals did those students have in one session. Let's say if you're serving maybe breakfast and a snack, or a snack and lunch or something, or a snack and dinner. So all of those things become really difficult for one person to manage. And usually a report will include some numbers, some just data, right? And then it may include a narrative too. So if you're having to do both, you want someone to assist you in gathering up everything, or basically just have systems in place so that you can easily collect this information when you need it. Because you don't want to have to be going back, say, oh my God, that event that was 2 months ago, now they want to know how many people showed up. I can't remember, I don't have the people's emails, So just have those things set up early. That can be part of the preparation and implementation stage. And well, yes, and every contribution has to be accounted for. So I mentioned this before, everything that you're doing, if it has a cost, consider if for the budget. Can it be added to the budget? Maybe it can't be, but if it can't, you need to find a way to pay for it, or maybe find a partner who's willing to assist you with whatever it is, or maybe you can get a discount from some other place. So consider all of those things. Yeah, so that's my info. That's my email that you can best reach me at. And I think we have 6 people left who stuck it out with me for the last, hour and 16 minutes. So, are there any questions? Anything anyone wants to ask? All right, back to me. Just want to make sure you guys see my face one more time. Where can we find grant info? Oh my gosh, yes. So I feel bad for this question, because when Melissa, thank you, Melissa, for inviting me. When she contacted me, I said, I don't know much about grants in Trinidad, but hopefully I can help people with general information about finding or writing for grants. So on the top of my head, specifically grants for Trinidad and Tobago, I don't know. But I will say that a good place to start is looking at the IDB or CDB, Caribbean Development Bank, which is based in Barbados, but they grant to all over the Caribbean. Now, see, if you look at one granting agency, you can just poke around and see what other agencies they work with or collaborate with and so on. And you're just kind of going to go down a rabbit hole from there. So I hope, Kiara, that's a little helpful. Also look at your local corporations. Like I know there's some banks. I believe Republic Bank has some grants, or has some grants they offer. Yeah, so I would say start local, and then it's look around to you just do a Google search, Caribbean grants, Caribbean arts grants. But then there's also some international grants that you might be available for, depending on what your project is. And of course, if you have an international partner, you're more eligible for international grants. But there's if you're looking for grants in North America or a partner in North America, one online source you can look for is the Foundation Center, which is great because it doesn't just have grants, but it has all kinds of resources. Basically, the information that I've gone through with you today, but a lot more of it, and actual samples and so on. So, Cameron said, do you have a template of a standard budget? No, but also agencies are different in how they want their budgets laid out. What you need is to have your own budget that you can refer to, so that when you're working with different grant templates, you can easily just plug in things, right? So also some agencies may ask for a budget or income and expenses for like the previous 2 years. It really depends. So no, I don't have a standard, a template of a standard budget. Or maybe you could write more if. Oh, okay. A template. No, I don't have a template of a standard grant template either. Again, the reason being that people will ask for different things. So that's why I decided to do this presentation this way, just going through it. I 5 W's and H, who, what, where, why, when, and how, because some grant applications can be very long and it could take you weeks, working on it, hours over weeks to fill it out. And then some grant applications could be something you could do in an hour, right? Depending on who the granting agency is and how much money it's for, or how long the project is. So no, I don't have a standard template. So, but what I suggest is that you do, and the slides, to answer Mahelia's question, the slides will be available, but through MusicTT, I believe they're going to share it with you all. But if you kind of go through this structure that I've laid out of the who, what, and your purpose, right? What's your point? And the who, what, where, why, when, and how. And you have that all written down for yourself, for you to refer to. You can plug that in to any grant, right? And for some grants, if you're lucky, you need to spend some time on like the what and the who, and it's 2-page application and you're good to go. And then Yeah, I wrote a grant early in January that was successful for the University of Trinidad and Tobago. And man, that thing was a beast. I wrote it with someone, and I still spent about, I mean, it was literally like 40 hours over about 3 or 4 days because I got no sleep. And we found out about it last minute, but and it was a lot of sections, but luckily a lot of the information for this project was already available, and it was for UTT, so they already had a lot of information about, you know, the university, and they have budgets and all kinds of things. So have the information ready, um, and you'll get your small grants, and then as you grow, you start to flesh out your information even more. And yeah, and you'll realize that after you've done a few, you can recycle the same stuff. So I guess the template is really what I laid out for you. Is this who, what, where, why, when, and how. Um, yeah. Are there any more questions? Okay, so if you all just wait a minute or two, um, thank you. And thank you for the questions. Thank you for sitting with me for an hour and a half. If you guys have just a minute, I'll drop in some websites, right? At least for the CDB and the IDB, who I know offer grants in the arts. And they offer all kinds of resources as well, not just for grants, but just professional development and access to other, what they call it, incubators, our arts incubators and so on, which is lectures and so on. So just give me a second here. Yes, feel free to contact me anytime via email. And I do WhatsApp as well. All right. So here is Carabank. Caribbean Development Bank. You have to poke around there a little bit to get to their grants, but okay. So here we go. Here's the link for Carabank's Cultural and Creative Industries Innovation Fund. Here, I'll drop a few more things in there in the chat. Okay. The IDB, so Trinidad and Tobago is right on their homepage. So And then you're going to have to poke around there a little bit to find what it is that you're looking for. And then this last one, Foundation Center, is a great resource, an awesome resource. They kind of focus on nonprofits, but as I said, you can find a lot of free information, grant writing, budgets. So I hope that's helpful. I really wish I had a better list of places for you all to find grants. But as I said, once you found one and you start poking around their site and seeing what else they do, who they've funded, that's a great place to start. Look at who these organizations, these foundations have funded. Go to those sites and see who else supports those projects, programs, or those organizations. And you'll find some really great things that way. Things I say, oh, I didn't know that bank or that government agency did have grants and so on. So it's a really great way to learn the lay of the land. All right. Any other questions? You're welcome. Okay, so since this is such a small group, I will put my WhatsApp phone number in there if you would like to WhatsApp me. But you have my email address. So, actually, I'll put my other email address. So after I put this email address, I will log off. But thank you all again. Listening to me. And this is actually my first webinar, so I hope you all found it useful, and I hope you have some successful grant writing in the future. And thank you, MusicTT, for inviting me, and good luck on the rest of the presentations. Thank you.